Thank you for joining me for another episode of Awake and Empowered TV. I'm your host, Ethan Fox. Today I have a very special episode. That's a clip from our 2017 Awake and Empowered Expo. We have Barbara Lamb giving a 2-hour presentation about crop circles. Barbara is a crop circle researcher and also a regression therapist who uses hypnosis in helping individuals to regress into past lives as well as extraterrestrial encounters. So she was with us this last expo and shared a wealth of information in this 2-hour presentation, including a lot of really interesting images from crop circles that she's researched around the world and what they represent, and some of the scientific research she's done on site to measure the energies in those environments as well. Very interesting presentation. I also want to mention we have our kids retreat coming up this August, the first weekend in August, and that will be, that's called the Weekend in Wizardry. We're teaching them all kinds of really fun things like telekinesis and telepathy and channeling and crystals and aura reading and just so many things on site there, as well as it'll be on a very natural environment with a petting zoo and lots of fun activities for them to do as well. So look for that information. We'll be posting it on our social media and by email newsletter in the next several weeks. So if you'd like to sign up your kids for that, we'd love to have them. And there'll also be classes on site for the parents as well. So you can learn how to better support your children and what they're experiencing as well. So it's a 2-part educational program that we have going on. We also have our Awake and Empowered Expo, our 6th expo, coming up this September 7th, 8th, and 9th at the DoubleTree Hilton in downtown Detroit. 3 full days of all kinds of very interesting presentations and workshops, but also a very high vibrational environment that will certainly transform you and how you experience your reality. So come check those out. You can sign up for or buy tickets to the expo at awakeandempoweredexpo.com. And the kids retreat will be posted very soon, so look out for that. But in the meantime, enjoy this 2-hour lecture from Barbara Lamb.
Well, I am delighted to be here talking about crop circles. Very frequently I talk about extraterrestrial encounters from all the about 3,000 people I have regressed to extraterrestrial encounters, but all during the years, 26 years that I've been doing that, I've also been a very avid crop circle researcher. And the way it began for me was that in 1990, I went to a big forum, a big expo called the Whole Life Expo in Los Angeles. And they have loads and loads of speakers at those events. And I looked through the program guide, and where they usually would have a little photo of the speaker and then a description of the lecture, in this particular case, it was a funny little pattern, little design instead of the speaker's picture. And I thought, oh, what's that? And then I read the title of the lecture, which fortunately had not yet happened, and it said something like, Mysterious Patterns in the Fields of Britain. And immediately, which is one of those moments, you probably have all had them, when you have just a strong response, a strong hit. And my hit was, oh my gosh, that's great, we're being communicated with from out there. So I went to the lecture and saw pictures of the 1990 crop circles and a couple of videos of them. And about halfway through the lecture, I found myself slapping my own thigh and saying to myself, okay, I'm going next summer to check, I have to check this out. It seemed like it was really important that these big patterns were being laid down in crop fields, mysteriously, very quickly, in the dark of night, in most cases. And it all seemed very mysterious. And so I was just that very same year becoming involved in regressing people to extraterrestrial experiences. So naturally, I sort of made the connection there and had a very strong sense that I didn't know specifically what the creators were, but they were definitely not from people. They were not from here. And that was intriguing to me. And it just sort of opened up a lot for me. So in 1991, I went to England for the first time for crop circles. I had been to England before, but not for that purpose. And I went into, about 13 crop circles, I think, and met some of the English, very dedicated crop circle researchers. And one night, I was in a little meeting in a pub, the Wagon and Horses pub near Avebury. I love that name, Wagon and Horses pub, very oldie, worldy country pub. And there was a meeting in the back room that I felt very privileged to be able to sit in on, a meeting of the Center for Crop Circle Studies in England. And I was sitting next to the head of the group, and a young man came in to the meeting with a little manila folder and a photograph, 8x10 photo, of the crop circle that had just been discovered that morning, and of the Barbary Castle crop circle, which is the one crop circle of all of the several thousands that we know of in England. This was the one crop circle, it turns out, that turned more people on to being interested in crop circles than any other. Anyway, the man I was sitting next to opened the folder and said, "Oh," threw his head back and he said, "That is beyond the pale." And it was such a beautiful, exquisite geometric pattern. And I looked at it, and the next thing I knew, my arm was flying up, and I was saying, "Okay, that's it, I'm in," which meant to me, okay, now I'm going to be dedicated to this phenomenon because it is truly remarkable. So crop circles have been happening actually in a very simple form for a long time, for some centuries. We know for sure that there was one in 1678 in England, and the farmer, of course, didn't call it a crop circle. Nobody called anything a crop circle, but it was a circle of laid down wheat in his wheat field, and it had happened suddenly in the middle of the night, but he and some neighbors had seen that night a couple of red balls of light flying around near the ground. Red balls of light. I mean, this is way before airplanes or anything technological like that we have. And so they wondered about that. And then there was this mysterious pattern, beautifully, evenly swirled and laid down. And in 1678, they had no way to explain this, so they thought of it as the work of the devil. And they actually named that formation the Mowing Devil, because they were imagining that here was a little devil figure with one of those old-fashioned hoes or something, laying down the crop. Well, then I think quite a bit of time went on, and a couple of crop circles were reported without that name in the 1700s and the 1800s. And even nowadays, farmers will sometimes say, "Oh yeah, my grandfather, who was a farmer, used to comment that once in a while they'd go out in the field in the morning and there would be a mysterious circle laid down. So they all were very simple circles. And in the 1970s, there were a couple of simple circles reported, and there were a couple in Australia, although the Australians seem to be considering those UFO landing spots rather than crop circles, and I don't frankly know which they were. And then in the 1980s in England, that's when the phenomenon started to really kind of pick up, in the sense that more and more of these circles were happening in the fields of wheat and oats and barley, oilseed canola, sometimes other crops like flaxseed crops. And they were noticed by a man named Colin Andrews, who was an electrical engineer, very nice fellow. And he was driving to work one day and looked down in a valley next to the road and saw this beautiful, perfect circle laid down in the wheat. And thought, wow, what is that? He hadn't heard about the one centuries earlier. And on the way home from work, he decided to stop his car and climb down the hill and go into that and see what it was. And it had an energy about it, had a really nice feeling in it, even a minor sound, a little crackling sound, because it was so fresh and new. And he then became extremely interested. He teamed up with a pilot of a small plane, and that man's name was Busty Taylor, and they used to team up and fly over the fields in southern England, Hampshire County mostly, and Wiltshire County, and Sussex and Somerset. And they would sometimes see another circle. And as the 1980s went on and they became more and more interested, and I think this fact they became more interested is significant here, the more attention they paid to these circles in the field and got a few other people to be interested, then it seemed like the more circles were appearing and the more complicated they were getting as well. So by the later years of the 1980s, they were beginning to see circles that had a perfect ring around it. And if the circle was laid clockwise, the ring around it was laid counterclockwise. So they were figuring, well, it isn't just something seemed like from above, but it wasn't something that just sort of stamped down the crops. In fact, every blade of these crop circles was just very beautifully, gently laid over, and the stalks kept growing and ripening and coming to full maturity, so they had not been damaged in any way. So the mystery became even a little bit more intriguing. And by the end of the 1980s, there was a big spread of crop circles. It happened over about 3 different nights, covering quite a number of acres in one area. And each little formation was like the 5 on a dice. They call them quintuplets or quinquuxes. And so there was one little quintuplet of laid down circles. And the next night, almost touching it, there was another little quintuplet, and another, and another, and another, until for, at least a half a mile, there were these quintuplet crop circle formations all nearly tangent to each other, all across that field. So then began to think, this is pretty amazing. And these two men, Colin Andrews and Busty Taylor, one day up in their airplane, so I'm going back a little bit in the 1980s now, they were saying, we've seen a pattern that is a plain circle, and we've also seen other patterns that are just a ring. Wouldn't it be interesting if we would see a pattern with the two of those together, like a circle with a ring around it? And that night, that pattern appeared. Now, here were these two men in a very little airplane that would hold maybe 3 people at the most, up there in the sky, talking, not on a radio or anything, and that request was answered. So then, another day, they were up there flying, and they said to each other, we've seen a circle, we've seen a ring. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could see circles in a pattern that would form a cross, like an old Celtic cross? That night, one of them was awakened by somebody who said, get over to so-and-so's field. There's something that's been happening there. And it was a crop circle in that pattern that they had imagined and talked about. So that began the thought that this is not just a random happening. It's not a meteorological effect, a little whirlwind effect or anything, but there's actually some intelligence involved here that telepathically or by remote viewing or whatever, we don't know, that some intelligence was picking up that these two men were very interested in this and had made that comment of what they would like. And it was granted. So that's one of the many, many themes about crop circles that has been intriguing to me. And I have found in leading my groups to crop circles in the summer that sometimes we will all get together as a group, might be 8 of us or 10 or 14 or 18 of us typically in my crop circle tour groups, and we would decide on a particular pattern that we would like to see made as a crop circle. And we would meditate for just a few minutes. I would ask them to visualize the pattern. Maybe we draw it on a paper first, and then so everybody was picturing the same thing, and meditate on it and just asking in our own mind silently for that to appear as a crop circle. And every time we did that, every year for a number of years, I did that with a group of people. And every time that wish was granted, that pattern did appear as a crop circle. So I began to really think, even more that there's some intelligence, and the kind of intelligence that knows a lot about us and knows about our thinking. How terrific. Now, in the meantime, as this was developing in my awareness in the crop circles, over there in England, I was doing more and more regressions with people who were having experiences with extraterrestrials, and a lot of details were coming out about that. And it was very obvious from those regressions that the ETs were very, very aware of humanity as a whole and about particular humans, about many particular humans. And how they know that from space or their crafts, their UFOs, or wherever they mostly are, we don't really know. We do know that we humans, or some of us humans anyway, have studied and learned the art of remote viewing. So the remote viewers that we have on Earth can know things in the past and in the future and anywhere on the planet and really anywhere in space. So if we humans can do that, I would certainly think that some of these other advanced races can do the same thing. Whether they call it remote viewing or not, they probably don't, but they have that ability. So more and more over the years, it became apparent to me that, yes, there really is something other than just an Earth phenomenon going on, some other intelligence from somewhere else. Now, in the meantime, through the years, starting in 1991 particularly, which was a banner year for crop circles. I'll show you a few pictures from that year. But anyway, it was a real burst into creative productivity of crop circles that were genuine. That means from this anomalous source. And then it turned out that the British government, very similar to our government in some ways, decided that, we want to downplay this. We don't want people to get all interested in the possibility of life out there in space and life coming to here in various ways. So they hired, it turned out later with a lot of research, they hired a couple of older guys who had retired, Doug and Dave, you've probably heard of them, and to go out in the fields and make some crop circles. And they did make one. It wasn't a great one, but anyway, they made one. And then the government sent in photographers to take photos of one of the genuine ones, saying that that was made by Doug and Dave, and therefore don't pay attention to this crop circle nonsense. It's just done by blokes from the local pub, and it's just a man-made thing, nothing to get excited about. And to this day, in 2017, many, many aspects of the British press still do this. They talk about the little teams of people who go out and make crop circles and try to keep down the interest about the genuineness, the mysteriousness, the otherworldliness of the authorships of the crop circles. They've been so effective that some of the wonderful English people I've known who run bed and breakfasts, where I've stayed and have taken my groups, those people who run those venues, and they're lifelong British people, they've been so indoctrinated with the fact that, just blokes from the local pub, vandals, traipsing onto the land illegally. They put a really bad light on it. And so our proprietors of these bed and breakfasts, and it seems like all the people in the shops and the restaurants whom I've asked about this, what do you think about the crop circles? And they'll say, it's just a bunch of vandals, or just a bunch of young guys, or just hoodlums. And so the campaign to really keep the interest down has been extremely successful. So most of the visitors to crop circles are by people like myself, people from other countries. And they come from all over the world because we haven't been indoctrinated so much by our press. So there are some wonderful English researchers, for sure. And they live there and they have a chance to see almost every crop circle that happens every summer. But most of the visitors really are from other countries. Kind of an interesting phenomenon. with the English people for the most part, just showing no interest. It's just a pest. It's one of those like graffiti on the wall, even though some of those patterns are really extraordinary. Oh, well, they're just getting better at it, these hoodlums, So anyway, the phenomenon has gone on, and for a number of years now, still happening. And the county in England that they mostly have been happening in is Wiltshire County. And one of the reasons for that, and one of the reasons for them happening more in England than in any country, although they do happen all over the world, is that under the surface of the soil in England, there's a lot of water, a lot of underground streams, underground rivers, geological aquifers of water, and the water component seems to be important in the making of a crop circle. So I'm going to show you some pictures, and I'm going to be mentioning certain things as we go. So here's a typical English countryside in the summer that happens to me a few years ago, standing in the eye of a chalk white horse carved into a hillside. There are 7 of those in Wiltshire County, which is where I've stayed for all these 26 years and visited crop circles in Wiltshire and going to other counties as well. So there are different theories. Lots of attention's been put into speculating about how crop circles are made. And one of the theories is by a biophysicist in Michigan who unfortunately died a couple of years ago, W.C. Levengood, from his biophysical lab. And he was sent stalks of wheat and the other crops from quite a number of crop circles, and sent stalks of the standing crop from outside those same crop circles. He did a tremendous amount of biophysical testing. And for quite a number of years, he was hypothesizing that crop circles were made by a plasma energy vortex swooping down like a little cyclone from the upper atmosphere, full of heat and full of energy. And when it would hit the ground in a crop field, it would draw up the moisture from the underground water, creating a steam effect. And that's why the plants could be laid over and not cracked or broken or damaged, and why they could continue to live, because they were still connected to their roots. So that was a very, very good theory. And then more recently, in the last very few years, he came up with another theory from all of his biophysical testing. And this is a theory that Patty Greer is promoting now and talking about crop circles. We have researched many a crop circle together. And so that new theory is that it is the earth itself that is somehow pulling down the crops into a crop circle. That the earth and its energy, and yes, the water, the steam effect too, and the heat that it's doing it. And she makes the big point that the earth, Gaia, is conscious, a conscious living entity. So she has that view. I still think it's coming from above, and maybe it's coming from both. Maybe there's some kind of synchronization between what's the energy, what's coming down from above, and what's pulling down from below. And maybe we'll never know. But that's part of the fun about the phenomenon, is that it is still, after all these years, mysterious. So you see in this depiction of a vortex, this is of course a painting, you see these little sparkles and balls of light. And balls of light have been seen in relation to crop circles. They've been seen maybe a couple of hours or a few hours before a crop circle is laid down. And there are some videos of a ball of light or a couple of balls of light flying over a field where a crop circle has already been made, as if, flying low over the field, as if really checking it out. And there is also a video from 1996 at a field called Oliver's Castle, where the video actually shows early in the morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, where there were 2 balls of light swooping over a field and one circling around in the middle, which became the middle of that crop circle pattern. And as the 2 other ones are swooping across the field, you can see lines radiating out from that circle with a little circle on the end. And then, so after those first 2 came over, a second later, either they or another set of 2 came from the opposite direction, swooping across the field. And then you can see each of those 6 lines lengthening out and completing the pattern. Beautiful pattern, absolutely perfect. Everything even about it. And the researchers who went into that, there are various things we look for, and they determined that this is a genuine crop circle. And just like anything that's a little bit anomalous or mysterious, there are people who will believe and trust that this is true, this is how it was made, by the balls of light. And then there are always the skeptics, even among the crop circle researchers. And the skeptics say, oh, it's got to have been dubbed in by, one of the technological methods we have with computers and CGI or whatever. And so the videotape taken of this was taken to a laboratory in London and one in Scotland and to Hollywood, and given to special effects people to say, is this real authentic footage, or are these balls of light somehow dubbed in? And the consensus of opinion from those technology experts was that, yes, the balls of light could have been dubbed in, but not in the short amount of time, about 3 hours time, between the videotaping of this happening, the balls of light, and then giving that tape to the researchers a number of miles away. So I think it's genuine. And the skeptics may continue to think whatever they want to think. But that's true of the UFO phenomenon, the extraterrestrial contact phenomenon, spirit visitations, ghosts, etc., on and on, that there are some people who, yeah, this is real, I'm experiencing it. And those who say, no, it's not real. Some people just don't want there to be anomalies. They don't want there to be mysteries because they like it concrete and they like to understand what's going on. So each to his own. But some of us are very excited about this phenomenon. So another way that crop circles certainly seem to be made is by a beam of light coming down from the sky. As in this case, this happened in a location in Holland several years ago. Bright beam of light seen from the house of the people who lived there. And then in the next morning, they went out in the field. It was a shorter crop. And there was, in that exact spot, there was a new crop circle. And there is a picture of that little crop circle. A simple one, but it seemed certainly like the beam of light had made it. Now, I'm showing you this picture of Silbury Hill in Wiltshire County because it's considered one of the ancient sacred spots. And ancient sacred spots very often seem to attract the making of a crop circle. In other words, crop circles, not always, but frequently tend to happen near the ancient stone structures. So this is, a few thousand years old, this man-made mound, Silbury Hill, and is made of carefully cut chalk blocks, rectangular shaped rock or chalk blocks, and then covered over with dirt upon which, over the centuries, the grass has grown. But it's an energy place. People feel good there. We used to climb it all the time until a hole fell in the top of it. After a UFO, by the way, incidentally, had been flying over it one night. And the next morning, people went up there and realized, oh my gosh, it's a big hole in the middle. And so then the police guarded it and wouldn't let people climb up. Once in a while, somebody still does, but they're not supposed to. But anyway, this is one of the sacred sites. And in this area, in all the fields around Silbury Hill, every year, every single year, there is a crop circle or two or three or more. It's just one example of the sacred places. Now, one of the things that is so engaging from my point of view, not only the mystery and what does this mean and what other intelligence is there that seems to be doing this, but the crop circles have an amazing variety of symbols. So over the years, there probably are 13,000 crop circles now that have happened in England and scattered around the world as well. And so I can't show you all of those symbols, but I can show you some. Now, in 1990, they went from a simple circle, and then a circle with a ring, and then the 5, mentioned the quintuplet, and then it became a little bit more elongated and complex in 1990. And this particular symbol used to be used in ancient times as a symbol for Gaia, for Earth, Mother Earth. So that got our attention. And then, still 1990, here was a double Gaia symbol. And in these, everything was laid down so smoothly, unbroken stalks throughout, and with a feeling that many people could feel, a feeling of energy, feels different a bit inside the crop circle than it does even a couple of inches outside of the crop circle. So the energy is very precise. And then another elaboration on that same form, the Gaios. In fact, ancient people called this the solar logos pattern from way back, many, many centuries back. And then in the next year, 1991, which is my first year visiting crop circles, that type of pattern continued, but with variations. And the remarkable thing that year was there were these straight line bars as part of the pattern. So we thought, oh, things are really beginning to develop here. And more variations, similar type, but variations on that same theme. So that may have a Gaia theme, but kind of expanding a bit. And in 1991, there was this one which looks like an old-fashioned key. And so people began to speculate, key, well, why would a key formation appear? Maybe we're being given the key to a larger reality or to a mystery. So it's almost as if, keep tuned in, folks. Here's the key, there's more to come. And 1991 was this pattern. Now, some people think it's a depiction of DNA, not the typical form that we see of DNA, or others are thinking it has to do with the brain, and there are gaps, as you can see, some gaps. So there either are gaps in the DNA or gaps in the brain synapses. So we began to wonder if maybe somehow we're getting warned about certain things. Let's keep noticing. And then some of the symbols began to be more overtly spiritual. Like this one is a symbol for ancient Beltane religion or Beltane spiritual belief, which was done many, many centuries ago by many people subscribed to that. It's about coming into incarnation, having different aspects, different chapters of life. Here's that key again, and then leaving, going out of life to come back in again at another point. And this was the Beltane symbol for God, for the Godhead. And then in 1993, we called this the Bythorn Mandala. Bythorn was a town that this was near, and this looked like a mandala sort of form. It also had some interesting geometries, the five-pointed star, the circles, and lotus leaves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the pentagon, and was really remarkably complex for a crop circle that would happen very quickly. 1994, we had this pattern, which actually developed in 2 separate nights, one right after the other. The first night, it took in about this much, and the rest of it was the growing crop. And then by the second night, all the rest of it had happened. So 1994, I know that that was a year when I, and a lot of people, millions of people probably, were really at home and at work getting connected with the internet. And so one of the speculations has been, could this be a symbolic depiction of the World Wide Web? Other people have said, oh no, this is the Native American belief about grandmother spider who weaves together all of reality. And that's another fun thing about crop circles, is that people from all different disciplines, different areas of knowledge and education project upon a pattern what they know. So I've learned a lot about geometry and astronomy and things and symbolism that I would not have ever known before I became interested in crop circles. So this is a good example of a crop circle down here, the same one. It's called the Avebury Web. It's next to one of the ancient stone circles, which is one of the very ancient sacred sites, still full of energy. It used to have many stones all around. And then, after many centuries, people started building a town, unfortunately, right in the middle of the circle, but it felt good there. And so they started using some of the megalithic stones, hacking away to get the stones to build their stone houses and little chapel and a bigger church there too. But anyway, the whole place still has a lot of energy, and this crop circle, as you can see, is right next to it. Now down in Hampshire County, in the early 1990s, there was this one which reminds us of the Maltese cross. And then 1994, we're still talking about symbols that we can recognize. And this, of course, is the Möbius strip, or the infinity symbol. This was a relatively small crop circle. Some of them are hundreds of feet long. Some of them are hundreds of feet in diameter. This was probably only a mere 200 feet in diameter, but a beautifully done little crop circle. And then 1995, we seem to get into other themes. I'm only showing you a smattering, of course. But this one we really wondered about. Could this be representing like a torpedo, or one of those undersea destructive weapons, or one of those ancient balls that people back in the castle days used to hurl and throw at each other? Anyway, it looks sort of lethal. Would you agree? And so again, we wondered are we being told something? Are we being reminded of our belligerence, our warlikeness? And here it is, just depicted right there for us. But then we had many other kinds of symbols coming along, like the pyramid and the sun and the radiating beams from the sun. And some of these crop circles, as you will see, look as if they're three-dimensional. And they're really not. They're done on a flat portion of field. 1995, very interesting year for crop circles. And some electricians said, this looks like energy running around the tip of a cathode. Or it could have very different meanings. Who knows? But I love this one. It's a great example of the shine. And as I have said, there's nothing crushed or broken about these crop circles, because there's the bent over plants are still connected to their roots. So they're very alive and well, go on growing, thriving, coming to full maturity. And when they're new and genuine like that, as opposed to man-made, they have that shine to them because they're alive and lustrous. And this, of course, has lots of complexity in all these rings, which are perfectly laid out in relation to each other. Now, I want to point out a couple of practical details. You probably notice that there are lines like this, double lines going through. Those are actually the tractor tracks in the field. All the English crop circles have tractor tracks. And they are sometimes 20 feet apart. In some fields, the tractor tracks are 40 feet wide, depending on their kind of machinery and how long the arms are. So if you want to figure out the size of a crop circle, if you know what that distance is, you can easily figure out the size of the whole crop circle. Now here, we have lots of other lines, and those, unfortunately, are foot lines from people cutting across the field to get into the crop circle. And we just abhor that. I have yelled at more than one person, more than one occasion, when I'm in a crop circle and I see somebody cutting across the field, because just one person cutting across will make that much of a line by pushing down the crop, which will not pop back up again. So I have definitely, on a few occasions, actually yelled to somebody and say, "No, go back, walk along the edge of the field on this side and come in the tractor track." The English call those tramway lines rather than tractor tracks, which I think is a nice phrase for it. And then we're getting into more complexity. We have a 5-pointed star within a 5-pointed star, and you can see the texture of the way that the wheat is laid down, how here it is smooth, great big circle, and to make these curvy shapes, it's laid down in a curvy fashion. I find very often that the details of the way the crop is laid down is just as interesting as the overall pattern. But you've got the star within a star, and then it almost looks like, you can interpret it different ways, but like little ripples of energy. So here's space, here's a star, here's a cluster, and ripples of energy coming out. Now this one was really amazing, really complex. It actually has lots of little tiny lines, and when I was in that crop circle, I didn't even want to walk in any of these lines because they were so thin. They were not even as wide as my shoe, my sneakers. So that's not really very wide, a woman's sneaker. But so these lines were not even that wide. And all of these exquisite details, these diamond-shaped points, and diamonds, and this little, beautiful little star-like cluster in the middle. And these points were really great. This one happened in 1987 when the harmonic convergence took place. It was that year, and some channeling by Judith Moore, who was my co-author of the book Crop Circles Revealed, which, by the way, I'll be selling outside the room when we finish. The channeling said that light was coming from the higher realms, not only from space, but higher dimension, and coming down and hitting the earth in these spots which look like lights. And so this higher light, spiritual light, coming down at that time, the harmonic convergence, hitting the earth and radiating out into all of these patterns. It's a lovely thought. And then we had a crop circle that's not a circular form on the outside, it's a triangular form. I mean, that was really different. And it also looks, of course, like something might be flying in, poof, and making an impact. So with some of these, some people interpret them as, oh, there's a comet coming, or there's something from space coming and perhaps colliding with the Earth. And this is very similar, this pattern, which was one of a number through the years, a number of different patterns of this type, but always different proportions, different details. And they're very much like the old Celtic cross, with a circle in the middle and 4 satellite circles, shall we say. Beautifully, beautifully done. That had such a lovely energy in it. And here is Silbury Hill again, and water. I mentioned the importance of water with crop circles. And across the road was this symbol, which is another ancient Beltane symbol. So the people, back 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, used to come over the ridgeway of hills that was on this side over here. They would come every May and celebrate Beltane and do their rituals. And this was their symbol. So it was appropriate that this particular pattern would show up and near the ancient sacred site of Silbury Hill. Now the yellow crop here is exquisitely beautiful, I think. Thick green stalks on every plant, and then a cluster of beautiful yellow blossoms in the spring, April, May, and into June, and then the blossoms sort of dry up and turn brown. But in the spring, they are so beautiful. Every time I see one of those, I've seen them in France and Switzerland and, of course, England, other countries, and I just go, they're so beautiful in the landscape, the green and then the yellow. So here's more of a detail of that Beltane symbol. And to get a sense of size, that little dot there is a person in the crop circle. So this has quite a bit of size to it. And then we're leaping ahead to the year 2000, and we had on the same night the most remarkable pair of crop circles. First of all, the heart, very soft, flowing pattern, and then this very regimented, organized pattern. So many of us thought of it, that this is a representative of 2 major aspects of us, people: the heart, the softness, the caring, the compassion, and the logical, rational mind, sort of like the left brain and the right brain, depicted the same time in the same field. Here's a detail of that heart formation. Now, I go into every dowsing rod with every crop circle with a pair of dowsing rods, because I'm always really interested in the energy. And the dowsing rods, I program them to show me if there's a change, particularly an increase in energy from anywhere inside the crop circle compared to outside the crop circle in the same field. So one day I was visiting this crop circle along by a companion named Simeon Hine, and he had an electrostatic voltmeter, handheld device, and we walked together from circle to circle to circle, and even into the little circles, and in the middle, and so we were right next to each other, and as my dowsing rods expanded, opened up, which showed me, yes, there's an increase in energy. To the extent that they opened up was registered exactly the same, but in a different technology, on the dial of his electrostatic voltmeter. So we were both interested in that corroboration. So that crop circle definitely had an increase of energy. And going on with more symbols, the ancient mandala from the Tao philosophy in China. This is a very beautiful one. And then another year, a double mandala. The mandala shape has shown up in about 6 crop circles that I am aware of. And this is a beautiful complexity and very graceful, I would say. And then, 1997, we had a Vesica Pisces. Now, a Vesica Pisces, and you could do it easily on paper for yourself, it's a circle, and then another circle which overlaps that circle, forming this shape in the middle. And in Europe, on the cathedrals and other places, there are many, many depictions of the Vesica Pisces, although it's turned more this way, so this is more up and down. Vesica Pisces meaning a very spiritual space, a spiritual realm. And in that spiritual realm, in the sculptures on the cathedrals, is Jesus Christ. But this was a lovely crop circle. So you can just see that there's a swirled circle here in the middle, and then the shapes formed by the overlapping circle. And this crop circle was interesting. Well, I had a wonderful feeling in it. Some of these crop circles just say, oh, come and be comfortable and meditate in me. Meditate or pray. And so you very often see somebody lying down in a crop circle or sitting and meditating. It just has that about it. It's invitational in that way. And where all of the laid down part was, every few feet somehow was one stalk of the plant standing up. So it definitely was not a case that the pattern was just stomped down in it or even gently laid down, because they had, in the whole formation, there are probably a couple of hundred of these single standing stalks, just standing up there, shining in the sun. Really quite lovely. And then the flower of life. Now, some of you know of the work of Drunvalo Melchizedek, and of course that's the name of the organization that's putting on this conference, the Flower of Life. And here is a flower of life depiction as a crop circle. There have been about 4 of those in different years that I know about, and none of them are exactly the same, but it's the same idea, the same pattern. And in 1996, we had the double helix DNA. This is a beautiful pattern. So here is a person and another person to get the sense of the size. Each one had a beautifully swirled circle. And we began thinking, wow, these are really thoughtful crop circles. Here's another picture of it in a darker form. And then in Korea, a few years later, was this crop circle, looking very much in some ways like the double helix DNA, but other people, like astronomers, there are a lot of astronomers who have put a lot of attention into the crop circles, and they put their interpretation on things. So they were talking about the moon, the new moon getting larger, the full moon, and so forth. And yet we can think of it in double helix DNA or any way we wish. And in 1999 was this perfect depiction of the Kabbalah tree of life. I mean, amazing. And all of these straight lines, as well as these perfect circles. And that's in that beautiful oilseed canola crop, too. And then that same year, we had the Jewish menorah. And even the little oil lamp that people used to light the candles in this Jewish menorah. And this, incidentally, is a barley crop. Barley is the most beautiful crop. A very thin stalk, and each one sort of folds over a bit, very lacy looking, little tendrils coming out. Looks like a boa. I don't mean a boa constrictor, but one of those boa feather things, very lacy, very light. And when barley blows in the breeze, it's like wind rippling across the ocean. It's just incredible. So this beautiful one was in barley. Then in 2000, there was this one. People were very interested that it happened in a field in the Cambridge, England area. And it was on a hill called Gog Magog Hill, from ancient biblical times. And many of us have thought of this as an angelic form. That's what it looks like to me. And other people say, no, it's the sun radiating out its goodness. But you are welcome to have whatever take that you want to have on any of these crop circles. But this is one of those ones, too, with very, very thin lines. And how this could have been made in probably 7 or 8 seconds, that's what's estimated. For these 7 or 8 seconds in making a complex pattern like that, it's pretty inspiring. Now, the same night, on the other side of Gog Magog Hill was this formation. So, keep pressing the wrong thing here. There we go. So this is a maze, not a labyrinth, but a maze, where you can easily go down the wrong pathways and have to retrace your step. And this, people have wondered if that's a computer chip. You think so? Without a doubt. Thank you. Thank you. See, I don't know about computer chip. I use a computer, of course, but I don't know what the chips look like. Oh, that's good. Okay, so computer chip and a maze and a very interesting, different pattern, as you can see. And then was this lovely little goddess formation. Now, the lady who ran the B&B that I stayed in for probably 23 years, and had never, and she's right in the heart of crop circle country, but she never had bothered to go a mile or two to go into a crop circle. And there had been a lot in her area, but finally, a few years ago, this one appeared right down the road, a 5-minute walk down the road from her B&B. So my English friend and I grabbed her by the arms, took off her apron, and said, okay, we're hijacking you, we're taking you to a crop circle, you've got to go in one. So she finally did. And that was an easy one to get into. Some of them were more complicated because of the fences and gates and so forth. But she even had to admit, this feels sweet in this crop circle. It feels gentle. It feels loving. And that reminds me to tell you that each crop circle feels different. Some feel more spiritually inspiring. Even if you haven't seen an overhead picture, I'm showing you overhead pictures, of course, from the air. So even if you just go in and on ground level, and you can't see the whole pattern that well from the ground, people say, oh, this one feels more spiritual. This one feels a little more sort of rational and logical. Or this one feels more expansive, more like I'm out in space. I mean, it's really interesting to talk to people in the crop circle and see what they're experiencing. Of course, it's very subjective. And here's just a depiction of an ancient goddess sculpture, very similar to that crop circle. There are many ancient depictions and carvings, sculptures, paintings of those things. And then we get into some of the Egyptian symbols and the wings of the falcon and the sun disk. This was right next to Silbury Hill. And then again, we've got in this one that ancient Chinese mandala, and this one, sort of the tolling of the bell, or maybe a metronome, or maybe none of the above. But again, a very different pattern. And this was one of my favorites. This was in a field across from Stonehenge. There have been quite a number over the years in the 2 or 3 fields that are across the main road from Stonehenge. And this looks like unfurling ribbons. And when my friends and I were in it, we were amazed to see that here's a pretty big pattern. This would be a few hundred feet between here and here. And here's this unfurling pattern in different directions, and none of them quite bumped into these other circles, which are ancient tumuli. A tumulus, singular, is, well, they've been thought of mostly as ancient burial mounds. And they're made of big, big megalithic stones, usually 3 of them, and then a big stone lintel. How those people ever erected those in very ancient times, a few thousand years ago, without equipment? How they did that, we don't know, but there were loads of them around England, and especially in a great big circle all around Stonehenge itself. So in this particular farmer's field, there are a group of tumuli, and this crop circle was laid down. This one comes the closest, just barely touching the outer circle of the tumulus, but it was beautiful and felt wonderful. Now this one, we have called this the basket because it has this wonderful woven pattern, some of the wheat over, some of it under, like a basket. And this pattern, it was very wonderful and was known for not only its texture and everything, but the farmer, as some of the farmers do this, they get out there as soon as they're aware of a crop circle and they mow it down. That particular farmer mowed this one down. However, one young man from Germany visiting England for crop circles happened to be up in an airplane and flew over this and took the one and only photograph of this. I had to get this from him from Germany for my book, Crop Circles Revealed. And then there were about 4 researchers who were up very, very early that morning, and they went into it and attested that it was loaded with that wonderful crop circle energy. So it was definitely genuine. And this one, have any of you heard of Eastfield, Alton Barnes? That is a place that over the years, until the last couple of years, but every year for many years, had excellent crop circles, just perfect conditions, perfect terrain for it. And this was one of the Eastfield crop circles, reminding us somehow of music, a music instrument or something to do with music. And here is a symbol of the nautilus, the way that things grow naturally in nature. And then this beautiful butterfly. The complexity of this is really quite extraordinary. And from the air, it looks like it's just flying along the hillside. So lots of little triangles and rectangles, descending size, circles. Just a glorious pattern, very energetic. And here, finally, is a picture from inside a crop circle showing the standing shapes, one of the diamond shapes. I said triangular, I meant diamond, and little standing tufts. Some of the interesting details. And then the next year was this one in the same general area. This was on top of a big hill, and there's an ancient hill fort that the ancient people had carved out of the ground. There are quite a number of those spread out through England from very long ago. And this beautiful pattern flying along. And some ground details of that one. And then the pyramid and the sun, again, a different depiction of that particular kind of pattern. And then as we were getting closer to 2012, and there was a lot of talk about the Mayan calendar and the ending of time, or the change of time anyway. And then this pattern happened, although this was as it recognizes an Aztec sunstone. And now look, we're still talking about symbols, and here is a really lovely Christian cross, looking quite three-dimensional, don't you think? And this was in a corn crop. In England, they call it maize. We call it corn. But a corn crop, as you know, can grow up to 12 feet tall, and some crop circles have been made when the crop is that grown. And of course, the corn stalks have a lot of leaves. They really kind of bush out, and then the kernels of corn. So you wouldn't think, or I certainly wouldn't, that a big 12-foot thick stalk with tough leaves and kernels of corn, I mean cobs of corn, that could be laid down and shaped into anything that they wanted to shape it into. But it does happen in corn, and this is a beautiful example of that. And another Christian cross, really, really different, in a different crop. This is in a wheat crop rather than corn, but I think that is one of the prettiest ones of all time. And here's the Celtic cross that is very much like, with the curvy shapes, circular form and the cross. So going back here, we have the circular form and the cross and the curvy shapes. Just exquisite. Then this one on top of the hill that was across the road from Silbury Hill. And look at the exquisite, and this had the most wonderful energy. I went back into it 3 different days just to enjoy it. And so we've got all these feather-like aspects, a lot of movement. Some people say this is the Greek glyph. Some people say, no, it's Mayan. And this was leading up to December 21st, 2012. And another one from that aspect of things leading up to the Mayan, supposedly end of time. You know, the Mayans never thought that December 21st, 2012 would be the end of the time. It was just the end of a cycle. But a lot of Americans went, bugga bugga, you know, the world's going to come to an end. But then there have always been people in human history who thought, the world's coming to an end. Well, it didn't, did it? Here we are. So this is a detail, and I love this, these shapes, and again, the detail with which the crops were laid down to form these shapes. Quite masterful. And here is a good old Mayan calendar. And this was part of another formation that led up to 2012 with the Mayan keys or glyphs and the star. And another one, this was on top of the hill opposite Silbury Hill, a different year, and people were calling this the Mayan headdress. It was a very nice crop circle. And then, that same year was this one, very, very different. You see the variety where there seems to be a stretching. And I saw this, I went into it, and felt like, it sounds kind of corny, but it felt like my consciousness, my awareness was being stretched. And then later, after visiting the crop circle, I saw a photo from the air and thought, well, that's interesting. It looks like something here is being stretched. Maybe it's that our understanding, our perspective of things is being stretched. And then here's a detail from the ground of those diamond shapes. And this one, now doesn't that look three-dimensional? This did not happen just before 9/11 and the Twin Towers, but it was just a few years before that, leading up to that. And that was quite a remarkable crop circle. There's no circle at all in that crop circle. Here's a ground shot of it. It's a beautiful, beautifully done crop circle. And here's another one that reminds us of music, or maybe a musical note of some sort. Some of them are just really pretty. Maybe the meaning is totally different than what I'm suggesting. That's part of the fun. Another one that reminds us somehow of music, lyricism. And then, in 2008, August 8th, 2008, in other words, 08, this crop circle happened. And that summer leading up to it, so many of us were saying, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if something special would happen on 08, and it did. And English friends of mine happened to be walking by the edge of this field that night, in the middle of the night. They lived on a little barge and they couldn't sleep, and their dog was restless, so they started to go out and take a walk, and they saw two brilliant balls of light, red balls of light, out in that field. And then when they came back later, in the light of day, there was this crop circle, 08, in an 8 sort of shape. Thought that was rather clever. And here's where the two parts of the 8 come together. Beautiful pattern in itself. And then the astronomy-oriented people were saying, oh, this is a depiction of moon cycles, new and full moon, may or may not be. And then I put this in because this is the way that we get into crop circle fields. Sometimes we have to climb over an old stile or a gate out there in the country. And then there are many anomalies in the plants themselves, and that's important to know as part of the crop circle phenomenon. Another indication that these genuine crop circles could not possibly be man-made. So here's an example of a plant. The roots used to be here. It was pulled out of the ground, and it has what we call a magical bend. In other words, as it came up out of the ground, it would just bend over in a nice curve, not crack, not open up, not break. And therefore, the plants, as I said before, could continue living, growing, ripening, come to full maturity. And here's an oilseed canola plant, which is very, very strong, rather thick and strong, the ones that have the yellow blossoms on the end in the springtime. So here's a nice bend coming up out of the ground. And again, nice bends. And you see the blossoms. Also, in the crop circles made in the oilseed canola, the blossoms are never crushed. If men had made the crop circle, they'd be all squashed down flat, but they're not. They're still fluffy and full dimensional, meaning that they were laid down probably by an energy rather than by planks and boards. So another thing that happens with the plants is that they will bend sometimes. Sometimes it curves, sometimes more of an angular bend in these genuine crop circles. And I mentioned at the very beginning that one of the theories is that a lot of heat is involved in the making of a genuine crop circle, and the heat comes to the ground and it draws up that moisture under the surface of the soil, and the plants then that are standing, they get very, very hot. And in order to not die, the plants very cleverly release the heat through the growth nodes in the plant. A node is kind of like a knuckle between one part of the plant and the next. So the plants with blown nodes like this, we say, proof that this was not done by men. This was done by the unusual phenomenon. And here's another example of a blown node in a stalk of wheat. So the blown node, letting all that excess heat out, actually saves the life of a plant. So when we go into crop circles, I mean, it's happened for years now, we look around, you see any blown nodes? See any magical bends? And more examples. Sometimes a hole isn't blown, but there's a stretching in the node, sometimes the hole, sometimes a crack, letting out the heat. And then sometimes the nodes are not blown, but they're stretched in the middle. This used to be a round node, and now they're just stretched, and somehow that lets out the heat. Now here are some small trees that were formed in a crop circle. The trees weren't formed, but a crop circle was formed in this grove of trees, and you could see even these tree trunks. They're rather thin, maybe 3 inches in diameter, were beautifully just bent over in the making of that tree circle. And here's another depiction of the bends and the canola plant again. And then with some of the plants that are affected by crop circle energy, you have real anomalies like this. So this used to be a stalk of wheat that went up straight with the head up here, but with the heat and the special energy, it's been bent over like this once in a while. And look at this one, affected by crop circle energy. So I love it when we find amazing things like that. And then there's a phenomenon we call bundling. And that means that as the crop is laid down, this is wheat, in some portions of it, it seems like some of the skin from the stalk has come apart from the stalk, still attached at the bottom, and it's wrapped around a cluster of stalks, like little tied up bundles, but all part of this natural phenomenon of making the crop circle. And then so here we have regular wheat nodes. And here we have some that were in a genuine crop circle with the blown nodes, so you can see the difference there. And then we get, odd plants in the canola crop or any crop sometimes that just are bent over and affected like that. And then one thing I didn't mention to you, but have been intending to, is that there's been a lot of testing on the plants in crop circles by certain researchers. I'm grateful to them that they've done this. So they have found that in a genuine crop circle, which keeps growing and ripening, that the seeds may be sort of dwarfed and misshapen, so you wouldn't think they'd be any good, but they are incredibly good. They're better than regular wheat seeds. And so a researcher planted some of those seeds from a genuine crop circle and found that the ones toward the center of the crop circle, which were experiencing a stronger energy, they grew stronger, quicker, faster. And then these seeds came from the center, this came from the circle edge, and these were control samples from outside the same crop circle. So you can really see that something has happened with the affected plants. And then, believe it or not, these are from the head of wheat that was affected by the crop circle energy. I mentioned they are dwarfed, and this is regular wheat samples. So, but these are the ones that, when planted consistently, in all the tests that have been done, grow stronger, quicker, faster, sturdier, and more nutritious, according to testing. So here we have regular kernels of corn from a regular non-circle crop circle plant, and here are the stunted ones from a genuine crop circle plant made in corn. So they really are different. And climbing over barbed wire, it's one of our frequent activities. I have many field pants that I save from year to year because they have holes in them from the barbed wire. It's the only place that, okay, complex geometries. This is that one I mentioned, that Barbary Castle, the crop circle that got me to raise my arm and say, okay, I'm in. And I'm still in 27 years later. And that is a beautiful one with lots of geometry features. Here's a drawing of it from a different perspective. And then this one looks like origami. It's the only one of its kind. And then we have a perfectly triangular crop circle with little tiny circles at each point. And this is a vector equilibrium. In 1995, Buckminster Fuller came up with the vector equilibrium. And that's a very, very important geometric form. Does that look a little bit three-dimensional to you? It does to me, and it isn't. It isn't actually. And then these geometries, we've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got the pentagon shape, pentagram, sorry, and then the star and the circles and the rings, and a circle within a triangle, within a pentagon, within a circle, all very quickly made, in these beautiful triangle shapes, and the swirls. This was one of my favorites from over the years. And this, 1999, was a Sierpinski gasket. Sierpinski was a European geometer, and he came up with this formation. And here it is in an English crop circle. And this is interesting. You've got all these circles, overlapping circles, not a flower of life pattern, but a very intricate one with looking like the thin part of the circles or rings are going over and under each other. And then this beautiful one, this happened in the morning, in the light of day, around 11 o'clock in the morning. I was at a conference about 2 miles away as the crow flies. And at that conference, it was a crop circle conference, there were 200 of us out in a yard holding hands in a bigger outer circle, a middle circle, and a smaller inner circle, holding hands, chanting. And as we were doing that, 200 of us, 2 miles away, this crop circle was being made by the genuine phenomenon, looking like, at least to us, many of us, it looks like sound resonating out from the circle. Now, isn't that beautiful? More than just a synchronicity, I think. And here, a friend of mine from Scotland took this picture, just happened to get it with a deer munching in the grass in the middle, loving the energy, presumably, in that crop circle. And look at the complexity of this. And again, probably made 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds in the complete dark of night. No streetlights around. It's the same one from a different perspective. And a similar one, very complex. So you've got all these different kinds of geometric combinations. There are no two crop circles that are exactly alike. There are some that are similar themes, but they always have a little difference, and they might be of different size, and they might be in a different crop from year to year. And this one, the triangle forms and the diamond-shaped forms, ground shot of that one. And almost like little houses formed in the laying of the wheat. More geometry, different patterns, and split geometries, like each little form is split. And this one, it just goes on and on with this particular one where the shapes don't quite join up. Some of us have thought maybe this is representing a slip in time, a slip in time. And the sugar cubes, we call this one, they really look like cube shapes and all those little radiations from it. And this is the perfect depiction of pi, P-I, geometrically. What a brilliant thing in the barley crop. Again. And sometimes we have to go between barbed wire to get into field. Fractals, a very important part of geometry. This is the Mandelbrot set. Now, the story that goes with this, and it's true, is that in 1991, when this crop circle had happened, there was a professor, Benoit Mandelbrot from Princeton University, who had been guest teaching over at Cambridge, England, Cambridge University. And then he left after his few months there to go back to Princeton. And the night that he left, he was in the airplane, this crop circle appeared with the Mandelbrot fractal pattern that he had been teaching about. So a fractal is a pattern. There are many, many different kinds of fractal shapes, I should say. And it's that this pattern, like from any one of these little appendages, could be repeated again and again and again to infinity. And this one, 1996, the Julia set of fractal geometry. And this was in the field across from Stonehenge, as well as that other one, but a different year. And each circle here was swirled in a different direction, a different way, clockwise, counterclockwise, and the same with all the little circles. Highly energized. This was a very well-visited crop circle. And you can see here is Stonehenge and the Great Plain, the Salisbury Plain that is on one of the major roads. And then in this field across the street was the Julia set. And there have been, I've been to a few crop circles subsequent years that have happened in that same field. And then about 10 days later, there was a triple Julia. We were just blown away with the first Julia, but here's a triple Julia set. And the arms are swirling in the opposite direction, and each one of these circles was done differently and had a different kind of center. This is a fractal shape too, and this could be from any part of it, could be repeated again and again to infinity. This is a fractal as well, so that this whole shape from any one of these forms could be replicated if somebody wanted to. And anyway, that's a very interesting, unusual fractal. And here's another fractal with a standing fractal in the middle. And this one, which was right next to Silbury Hill, each one of these little circles was done differently with a different center all around. Anyway, there's a beautiful fractal shape which could be repeated from any side. And here it is in relation to Silbury Hill. And then, about a week later, another one of that same outside shape happened in a different field, but now a standing fractal was left. So I love this progression of things. And still another fractal with a different kind of fractal center. And a trapezoidal fractal. This was on top of the hill, across from Silbury Hill too. That's a great field for crop circles. And this one, notice it's square on the outside, and then there's this shape on the inside, and then about a week later, in another field, not too far away, was this one with that inner shape now on the outside and the square in the middle. This one looks three-dimensional too, don't you think? Huh. Beautiful. And then this one, this is just incredible. And again, we know that this was just made in seconds, probably less than 20 seconds. All of those shapes reverberating from that center. And this one, these are still fractals. And then the great climax of all these was in 2001. This is called the Catherine Wheel. And it's about 709 circles in a 300-foot diameter made during a fierce rain and windstorm one night. And yet, in the morning, when the storm cleared up and the sun came out, people rushed up to see it, and there were no muddy footprints anywhere. Nobody had been near that crop circle, and yet it had been made in all of this perfection. Just incredible. English countryside, magnetic field shrinking, a depiction of the solar system with the Earth missing, should be on the third ring out from the sun, and it isn't. That kind of got our attention. And a crop circle depiction of the asteroid field. It's a drawing of the asteroid field. And we just have to go quickly, but this was a spinning galaxy, it seemed to us. Here's another depiction. And the Julia set, going back to that one, the triple Julia looks like a spinning galaxy. This one looked like the seven sisters of the Pleiades, very sweet little crop circle. And a good friend of mine, meditating. She's a channel, so she often channels in a crop circle. This was such a beautiful one. More people climbing over the barbed wire. Balls of light, an anomaly. In some of the plants, the heat is so high that flies have been fried through and completely stuck to the plants. And then here's a beautiful depiction of a ball of light in a crop circle. It may or may not have made that crop circle. Actually, the crop circle is up here, and it's in the field nearby. And people meditating outside of a crop circle, and there were balls of light there. And really quite a number of pictures. This man was in a crop circle, and there was a ball of light right by his foot, which he wasn't aware of until he saw the picture later. Balls of light in a crop circle. Orbs, lots of orbs or balls of light in a field where there was a crop circle, and streaks of light. I took this picture myself, and I was in that crop circle, I didn't see that streak of light, but there it was. I was thrilled when the picture was developed. And then loads of balls of light flying over this field where it's a beautiful wavy cross. I love this cross. There's actually a whole series of pictures. So there were probably about 20 or 30 or so at one time of those balls of light over that crop circle. And a little more subtle ones, balls of light or orbs in a crop circle. And this is a painting of that Oliver's Castle one where the two balls of light came swooping over the field. There was one circling in the center, and the rays, the points were coming out from that, seemingly to be made by the balls of light. And here's a picture of that crop circle made by the two balls of light. Beautiful, it's absolutely perfect, and loads of energy. Now, here we are in a crop circle. That's me and an orb up here and here. And another one, I took this picture too, not knowing that that fluorescent light was there. And here, so the balls of light come frequently to the crop circles. And here's that Oliver Castle, again with the two balls of light. And beams of light. I showed you one at the very beginning. This is sort of a broader beam of light coming down into that particular crop circle. And some of the farmers are perfectly okay with your going onto the land, and they decide, well, we might as well collect a little money for it. So they erect this big farm equipment. It's so heavy that it couldn't be moved if somebody tried to. Have to be moved by a tractor or something. And people will put money happily in there, knowing that they're welcome on the land. So predictions of astronomical events. In 1999, there was an eclipse in August of that year, and in April, in the oilseed canola crop, here was a depiction of the eclipse just about to happen with the sun, a moon getting ready to move over the sun. And then, 1994, Shoemaker-Levy comet, actually in our skies, went across a great distance and collided with planet Jupiter. And there was another one before this crop circle in May that looked like something flying across a hillside. And we realized after a while that that must be a depiction of the comet heading toward Jupiter. And then just before, like hours before the real comet out there hit Jupiter, this crop circle appeared in England. And then every time the piece hit, see, the real comet had 21 pieces in it. And so those two first ones crop circles had 21 circles. And every time another piece actually hit the planet, another crop circle happened in the fields of southern England, depicting the comet with a different sort of head leading the way, and one fewer circles in its tail. So as the comet kept hitting, there might be a day or two between pieces hitting Jupiter, and then the crop circle would be showing up with one fewer circles in its tail. And this one has a little ball of light right there. And so on, it's getting shorter and shorter as more of the comet was hitting Jupiter. And then finally, at the very end, all of the pieces of the comet had hit Jupiter, And this crop circle seemed to wrap up the end of it, I think. I think that's what that's depicting. And I was the one to discover that crop circle and be the first one in it. Now, this one, huge, hundreds of feet long in Eastfield, and people have said, oh, that's moon cycles. This was done on 07, 07, 07. And this is how some of the astronomers have interpreted it, may be correct or may not. And then there are other, like lunar phases, sunrises, and so forth, that certain people recognize in some of these crop circles. And this one, our solar system, as the planets will be lined up on December 21st, 2012. So this was done in 2010. And astronomers looked it up in the star maps that they have, and it was an accurate depiction of the way that the planets will line up on December 21st, 2012. It's just a drawing of it. Harvard astrophysicist Rudy Schild, who's a friend of mine, looked at this and he said, you know, this is exactly right. Here's Pluto. Pluto does do that. That's the way its orbit goes. Exactly. He said, whoever did this crop circle really knew, really knew their astronomy. So different eclipse crop circles, paying a farmer to go into the field. Portals, I think we're going to have to go quickly. Quickly, portals. Don't this look like three-dimensional portals or three-dimensional somethings? There's a whole series of those a few years ago. Beautiful. And this one, many of us think it looks like a doorway to another dimension. Silbury Hill, again, okay, we're not going to be able to do this, but you can get a sense of some more shapes, the curvy pathways that the crop is laid down in. Sometimes this looks like a Van Gogh painting, and just because of the way that the crop is laid down. And ripples in some of those wider spaces of crops. Looks like a rippling of, like a stream over the dirt. I love that. And with this crop circle, every ring and every circle was laid down only halfway, not laid down to the ground. How could that be done? And that's very auspicious. White chalk horse, the side of the hill, and quickly, little nests and sculptures are sometimes done in the wheat by the anomalies force, a little triangle of wheat standing up here, a little circular nest with radiating stalks, and overlap, beautiful patterns, the way it's laid down. And in this case, this crop circle, these were sculptures in the wheat, and they were at least 3 feet tall, and in one case, 4 feet tall. You just wonder, how does that occur? And then these ridges of wheat in this particular crop circle. Oh, boy. And this crop circle, the stalks came in from a perfect circle on the outside, came swooping in and swirling around in the middle, instead of the typical way, which is being laid down from the middle, radiating out. This came from the outside in. It's the only one I've ever seen like that. And stalks bent over at the end. And it's sort of a braiding pattern, the way it's laid down. Oh, there's so much more I could show you. I think we better call it quits for today with this beautiful scene of the Vale of Pewsey in Wiltshire. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Awake and Empowered TV with our special video clip from our 2017 Awake and Empowered Expo with Barbed. Join me next week as we speak with another incredible individual who's standing on the leading edge and changing the world.